Anyways, yeah. Let's go. Okay, so we got the Just Strife Haze video. And then I can probably do a bit of Final Fantasy finally. Jesus Christ. Alright, Just Strife Haze, horizontal versus vertical design. And by the way, in my opinion, horizontal design is better. Vertical design is great for keeping people signed in and like paying monthly subscription. Horizontal design, in my opinion, is just better for the player base. You don't feel like you have to play the game. It's not great for the game. For the game itself, vertical design, in my opinion, is better, just for monetization reasons. Horizontal, though, is better for the player. By far, is better for the player.
MMORPG games have a ton of
Neverwinter.
epic quests where you help others to life skills where you can relax and forge your own little existence, dungeons and raids rewarding powerful weapons and armor, or hidden areas where the only reward is the warm fuzzy feeling you get for finding a secret. The content you personally enjoy will help guide the game you play. There's no perfect design, but the idea of progression on a journey
Final Fantasy. God damn, look at all the Patreons, bro. He's just gonna keep, and he said this, it's like if he gets like even more Patreons where he can't even fit it in this font, he's gonna make the font smaller and smaller to the point where you won't be able to read it. It's fucking hilarious.
You experience and you grow, and within that progression there are two primary schools of design: vertical progression and horizontal progression. So let's discuss what they are, the strengths and weaknesses of both, and the type of player that each appeal to. Quick note, this video is sponsored by Guild Wars 2, which is super convenient for me because I was going to use them as an example anyway.
Oh, nice.
I'm Josh Strife Haze. I've played a lot.
Dude, I want to get back to Guild Wars 2, man. Like, I don't know, maybe they patched the combat to feel a bit better or whatever, but like when I was playing, the combat just did not feel very good. So I really want to get back into it. But I also want to finish MSQ in Final Fantasy. After that, we'll see. Honestly, I'm also considering getting New World. Like, you know, but we'll see.
MMORPGs, and while each is magically different in its own unique way, they all broadly appeal to one of two demographics: people who like vertical progression and people who like horizontal progression.
Yeah, get the fuck out of the circle, guys. Hello?
Imagine a vertical line with increasing numbers marked on it. Let's say from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
This line represents power, with 1 being weak and 10 being strong. We can take anything from
the biggest problem with vertical progression, in my opinion, is you work so hard to get to the 10, and then a patch comes out and you drop down to 6 and you have to climb to 10 again. And this constant climb from 6 to 10 is great for the game in retaining players and like making people resub and replay and all that stuff. But in horizontal, once you reach 10, you're always 10, but you can get more items in the 10 area and then try different builds. You're not pressed for time to get to 10. You can enjoy the game overall more, can explore. You're not forced to like just get to end game and compete with others because you're not limited on time. World of Warcraft is a really bad vertical design only because you reach the max level, you want to compete with people on like the level that you want to compete, heroic, mythic, whatever, right? But it's like everything you do is like all the time you're spending is just to get to like the level 10. And as soon as you get to like 10, patch comes out, everything you did is drops you to 6. You have to do it again. So you don't have time to explore other shit, go do pad battles, go do like, I don't know like mog farming and stuff like that. You don't really have a whole lot of time. I'm not talking about like people who play the game for a living, like Asmongold, Rich and all that stuff, like Towley. They can play this all day so they can experience everything the game has to offer. A regular player who has like 2 hours a day maybe to play, and he wants to be a top tier player, he can't experience the game at all. In horizontal, he can though, because the bar doesn't keep getting further away. If the patch comes out and you're at 6, you're at 3. So your climb is even bigger again, right? So it's like, that's why I hate vertical design for the player. And I feel horizontal is just way easier and way better, like long-term for the player itself, because he's not in a rush to get to be top tier.
Weapon or piece of armor or equipment and place it somewhere on this scale. A bronze dagger in RuneScape may be a 1, an abyssal whip may be a 7. Ultimately, everything can be ranked. Vertical progression is the design of things at the top being the most desirable and things lower down simply being stepping stones used to reach the things at the top. You will go through the numbers from lower to higher, ultimately wanting to get to and remain at the highest number. If an MMORPG is a vertical progression game, this table ends up being taller than it is wide. The aim is to climb and
Oh,
stay
tall,
there.
tall,
It
tall,
appeals
tall.
to people who want the best stuff. It appeals to people who value power over the experience. Horizontal progression is slightly different. It's not that horizontal games don't have the vertical scale, it's that
They do, but it stays.
than they go tall. You may have multiple items of the same general strength, but
Yep.
they're achieved in different ways. They may be situational instead of objectively better.
Yep.
The scope of experience in the game is usually broader, and older content remains relevant a lot longer at the expense of the power cap being generally lower. So let's look at some examples and
The
discuss
power cap can still be a lot higher, but it's like it stays there. It doesn't, like, it's not like with time the top, the end of the game becomes further away. No matter if you take a 2-year break and you come back to ESO, the top of the level is still where it was, right? It's like if let's say you're stopped at a point where, like, in a month of grinding you would get to top tier. If you took a break for 2 years in, let's say, ESO, it would still take you that month to get to the top. In WoW, if you took, like, let's say you had like another month of grinding to get to the top and you took a 2-year break, it's gonna take you a few months. Obviously not because of catch-up system, stuff like that, but like, you get my point, right? It's like the bar just keeps getting further away the more you don't play.
Strengths and weaknesses of both designs, and then maybe you'll discover which design you are most attracted to. I'm going to cover
also, like, horizontal. The horizontal allows you to play alts a lot easier than vertical. Even if catch-up mechanics for alts is not there in horizontal, it's still easier than in vertical. It's very hard in vertical to maintain many characters or many champions or many heroes, whatever, at the top tier. Very, very hard. In horizontal, you can. Once one of them is at the top, he will stay at the top. You can go create a new one and level him and do everything on him, and he will get to the top. Now you have 2 at the top, and it never changed. They're always going to be at the top, right?
Debate. 1. Chasing power versus the process itself. 2. The viability of older content. 3. Balancing the power standards. 4. Power creep versus feature creep. 5. Stat or feature squishing. 6. The ability to take a break and then return to the game. And 7. The personal drive of social power or personal enjoyment. But before we analyze these 7 points, a big thank you to
Guild Wars 2 looks really fucking, like, Guild Wars 2 is not even about Guild Wars, it's about Mog Wars. The appearances, like the cosmetics in Guild Wars 2, are just so fucking good.
Agreeing to sponsor this video. I've played Guild Wars 2 since it launched all the way back in 2012, and it's been one of the few MMOs I've installed on every PC I've had since then, and finally, after like 5 years of coming soon, it's actually released on Steam. They've even released 2 very positive reviews. The latest expansion, End of Dragons...
Though it is kind of biased because most of the people who reviewed on Steam are probably people who already played it or are still playing it. So it's, you know, but overall, the thing is with WoW, for example, you hear a lot of like the bad stuff. Like, it's popular to hate on WoW. I haven't heard a lot of, and I do follow like some Guild Wars content creators. I just don't really cover it. So it's just kind of like talks about the game or check out mods, new content that comes out with the expansion, whatever. But I don't hear a lot of bad stuff in comparison, right?
Ton of new content without invalidating the previous expansions, Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, but you don't need to buy anything to try the game. There is a massive free trial.
Which is also fucking amazing that they have a free trial for the core version of the game. I do not understand why Blizzard does not have free trial. They do up to level 20, which gives you absolutely nothing. The free trial of Blizzard should be most likely 2 expansions prior to the current one. So for example, right now Shadowlands is the main expansion, right? So the way I see it's like 1 to 40 should be content from all expansions up to Legion. BFA is 40 to 50, 50 to 60 would be Shadowlands. Obviously they're doing 1 to 50 is any content you want, and 50 to 60 is Shadowlands. The way I see it, what they should do, though honestly BFA sucks, so I understand why they don't, but what they should do is free trial would be 1 to 40, all expansions except the last one and the current one, right? At like the very worst. At the best would be all expansions including the previous one, not including the current one, would be on the free trial. Because either way, that content is so irrelevant, no one even plays that content. You're not going to be able to do the raids in that content, but you can experience the game. And no one will really like be like, well, I'm never going to pay for the game. I'm going to stay in my free trial and I'm just going to stay at level 50 and I can do the old raids with people, but no one's going to do the old raids. So it's like, why are you staying at 50? It makes no sense. But you can pay for the game, and you can go on to do the current content, right?
With no time limit, and if you do like it, it is a one-time purchase with no monthly sub.
Also, the mounts in Guild Wars 2 are great.
Own it. And given the amount of hours I've got out of this game, Guild Wars 2 is probably the best value money I've ever spent on a video game. To celebrate
for now, yeah, but I can say easily, New World, in my opinion, money for time investment, New World is up there with Guild Wars 2. A lot of people spent thousands of hours for a $40 game. You are not going to get that value out of any MMO unless it's a free-to-play, but in free-to-play MMOs, it's a pay-to-win for sure.
Celebrate the Steam launch, there's a link in the description. You can sign up, get a code, and grab the game on Steam. And then if you want, you can redeem the code for an experience boost pack, some karma boosting, and a 10-slot bag with a mini pet. This all saves you about $10, and it's free, so there's no reason not to.
Why not, right?
Player guide on the website, although the in-game tutorial is actually really good. There's great build variety in the classes, and the mount system is so good it is now the standard by which other games are to be judged. Now, regular viewers...
Fair enough, yeah. It is that good.
Unless I can personally vouch for the product, and honestly, Guild Wars 2 is just a really good MMORPG game with a great deal of content that every player should at least try.
Yep, I agree. For me, my biggest pet peeve with Guild Wars 2 was just the combat system. It just felt uncomfortable to me. But as far as like the game content and like how the world is and stuff like that, I like top tier, I think.
Lucky user who uses this code will get the $100 pack on Steam, including all the Guild Wars 2 content, absolutely free. Check
no
the
way.
video description for more details. Right,
I'm gonna check that shit.
Vertical versus horizontal design. Let's start with the basics. The most
I think I have all of that already.
Is the chasing of power. The best item, the best armor, the best spell. The numbers are simply higher. You can compare and contrast every item in the game and see at a glance, objectively, which is a better choice. A sword doing 1 damage compared to a sword doing 10 damage. Higher number, better. This can lead to game design where a single choice is objectively correct for the majority of gaming situations, and that choice has no variations within itself. If there is a best weapon in the game, everyone wants to get it and use it. That is the power you chase. For vertical players, the actual experience of getting the power comes second to having the power itself. They value the reward over the process. In horizontal progression, it's less about the power and more...
But I wonder if Josh ever got out of ARR zone. I don't think I think he still didn't do even Heaven's Word.
About variation and experience. The process is now more important than the reward, because the reward isn't specifically any more powerful than what you already have. Imagine you have a weapon which does X amount of damage, and there's another weapon in the game which also does X damage, but now looks different, or is achieved in a more difficult way. A good example would be...
Also has different secondary stats, so even if the damage is the same, the secondary stats or the set bonus that it provides would be situational for other content that you want to do.
The ornamental kits in old school RuneScape or RuneScape 3. They make the weapon look different visually, but they act identical.
I mean, who cares how you look like in RuneScape? Still look like fucking dog shit.
Itself, but you will have the experience of getting it. Man. The focus is on variations, not greater items. But how does this affect the game when you've got everything and new content has to be added? With vertical design focusing on the reward and horizontal focusing on the process, the risk for vertical comes in the form of, once a player has the power, why would they go through any process when they know it would reward a less powerful item? If your player-based values being the most powerful and they are the most powerful, other content loses its appeal. This is a major problem with vertical design. It invalidates old content extremely quickly. If a dungeon drops a weapon or armor set and then a new dungeon drops a better one, the old dungeon simply becomes a stepping stone to the higher one, but then forgotten about once the higher one is achieved. Vertical progression attracts players who want to climb up, and everything lower than where they are is seen as pointless. New content doesn't become more of the game, it sometimes becomes the only
game, the new game. Yeah, you play the patch,
Ironically, an
you don't play the expansion. Yeah.
doesn't actually expand a game if it becomes the only part
Yep.
of the game worth focusing.
Which is what
Now, horizontal
WoW is.
design often links together older content with newer content because the focus isn't on outclassing but supporting. This isn't to say the rewards for new content aren't more powerful. They can be, but they are never completely eclipsed by new things, or the time taken to advance on the vertical ladder is still great enough that old content is still worth doing. Consider a new expansion in World of Warcraft. When something new comes out, the older content and the older expansions are often outclassed in terms of power. The best items from 10 years ago are superseded by average items from now. But
not even average item.
Horizontal design in content. Look at the Barrows armor in old school RuneScape. The Barrows minigame released in 2005 and the rewards from it remained relevant for years. Indeed, old school RuneScape itself released in 2013 and the Barrows minigame is still a vital part of a new player journey. Despite many similar rewards now existing, it's not been overshadowed. When an MMORPG receives new
I just don't know how people play RuneScape aside from like people who used to play RuneScape. How does it get new players, man? You look at this and you're like, yeah, no, definitely not for me. Like, there's nothing going on and I still don't know what is going on with the screen, you know?
Level content, vertical MMOs often watch older content become irrelevant because the power level has risen, and horizontal MMOs watch older content become another piece in a greater puzzle as the variation increases. But both of these can lead to issues, with point 3, power creep versus feature creep. If your game is vertical, players want more power. If your game is horizontal, players want more choice. Adding power is simple. Increase a number, weapon do more damage, armor stop more damage. Even releasing a new class or race like Neverwinter did with the Metallic Dragonborn and just straight up giving them better passive buffs. Adding more power patch by patch is super simple, but it leads to the inevitable endgame of power creep. When everyone is godlike, no one is. Power.
Yeah, and also like you're gonna have to start nerfing. Like Neverwinter, as far as I understand, went down from level 80 to level 20 max level at this point. Like they had to do a massive nerf across the board.
Is only powerful when compared to something less so. And when everyone is hitting millions of damage, the number itself isn't considered large. That's just normal.
The fuck is
a player
that?
who wants to be considered powerful must be compared against a player of lesser power. So by increasing the power cap every update, you're adding small windows of gameplay where the players race to achieve the increase
I have the Dragonborn
and enjoy being more powerful for a short time before inevitably everyone catches up. So you increase it again, and you repeat this forever. Horizontal progression, however, may avoid that absurd degree of power creep, but it still faces the equally complex issue of feature creep. If a new update in a horizontal game can't simply make a number bigger, it needs to change something mechanically, adding a new choice, a new situational effect, a new experience for the player.
A new set.
Which has elemental damage, or does more damage at nighttime, or armor which works better when you stand still. If you can't just make a number go up, you have to make the gameplay experience change. And while this is great in the short term, it can lead to a
it's very hard to keep changing it.
Being added which are overwhelming when a new player joins and has to understand all of them in one go. Feature creep can sometimes even be more insidious because the enfranchised player base doesn't realize how complex their game has become as they've adapted to each feature change slowly. It doesn't feel much more different because things were added one at a time. But then a new player joins and they're told about many systems added slowly over many years, and they're expected to understand how they all link together. Sometimes these negatives can actually combine and you end up with an MMORPG adding updates or content which both increases the power level substantially enough to invalidate old content and add new complex systems which are overwhelming for new or returning players.
Oh, like World of Warcraft.
Updates are often met with major backlash from the player base and result in people leaving. For a great example, see the evolution of combat for RuneScape back in the day. But this leads on to point 4. Developers must know that power creep or feature creep exists, and they must realize the issue. So why do they do either one? Well, it's because the player base that game is aiming at actually values the advantage they can gain from being the player to exploit that change. Players who enjoy games with power creep often enjoy the power creep because it's a measurable way to be more powerful than someone else. This is especially prevalent in PvP games or on PvP servers, where creating a power imbalance in your favor is literally part of the experience. You can have a better weapon or a better set of armor, and you can use that power to defeat someone else. The imbalance is by design, and new players will struggle to beat old players because the maths simply doesn't allow it. A vertical progression game encourages players to climb the ladder by letting them compete with players higher up on it and losing, or compete with players lower down and winning. That's the revenge.
This was the best part about TBC was, well, in Wrath of the Lich King was the battlegrounds, right? Even Arena really, but it's like the battlegrounds specifically, where it's like you just start with battlegrounds, you get owned and shit, and then it's like start getting your honor and you get the gear and stuff like that, and then you start stomping other people. That is a good feeling, but in my, like, the way I see it, it doesn't last. Like, you will have fun with it, sure, but it's not a very long-term fun, right? So
this may be
as much as I love going like 1v5 as a paladin and Wrath of the Lich King, just fucking demolishing people, because first of all, Ret was like, well, sorry, Prot, Ret, and Holy were overpowered as fuck in Wrath of the Lich King, and also, like, because you're overpowered, you kill more people, you get more honor faster, you get your gear faster, you get to kill more people, right? So you just like become fucking a crazy demolisher in PvP, right? But again, it also made me like kind of not want to play PvP anymore, because like, well, I just stomp everyone and it's fun here and there, but it's like it's just not as fun. So you go into the arena, but in the arena, usually once you get to a certain ranking, you play with just certain comps, like it's just not as fun anymore. Like, you don't get to stomp, it becomes a skill based. And don't get me wrong, it's like there's nothing wrong with skill based, but it became more of a lot more meta. In BGs, because it's so unorganized, you can stomp three people who, if you met them in arena, would not let you do anything. But because it's in the BG and they're so unorganized, they're not used to playing together, and like they're not on comms and all that stuff, you can just like kill them. In an arena, they're usually like in comms, they have better teamwork, and it's like they control, like it's more controlled environment. In BG, you can meet them when they don't have cooldown. In arena, everyone has their cooldowns, right? So it's just not it's more balanced, but it's just not as fun.
I want to be that.
Yeah.
Power creep is designed to encourage that competitive mentality by making power so easy to measure. What does horizontal progression do? Well, if it's PvP, it often focuses on the balancing of the experience, balancing the playing field. Now, regardless of the sponsorship, I would have still used Guild Wars 2 for this example. Having the...
Yeah, so, dude, I was just saying, like, can you please change to like Guild Wars 2, because I can't even... My eyes hurt looking at RuneScape. I just cannot stand the graphics anymore.
PvP arena, which levels
just hurts my eyes.
Gives everyone equal equipment and lets you compete in a fair fight. But there are issues with this too. You're directly removing one of the core aspects of the RPG, the progress. And now you're competing on the PvP scene against larger, more established games who specialize entirely in PvP. Ultimately, both of these approaches, adding increasing power or adding increasing features, serve to deepen the divide between the player base from the start and finish of the game. And this often ends up needing a stat squish or feature reset to fix, which leads to point 5. When the game simply becomes too vertical or too horizontal, and the gap between players too great, the game has to be brought back to a manageable size for the player base to actually play together. And resets can be complex in different ways.
Oh yeah.
Power-based stat squish mostly just involves reducing the numbers, which never feels good because players feel like you're taking earned power away from them, but can sometimes be justified for the longevity of the game. And while I'm not a fan of the process of removing anything, I can understand the long-term goal they're going for. Like how Neverwinter briefly had damage numbers in the tens of millions and had to reduce all numbers by a factor of several hundred before we ended up hitting trillions. A vertical power-based game has an unusual relationship with stat squishes. They will be needed more frequently, but because they're just reducing the numbers behind the scenes, they're actually very easy to do. Horizontal progress games, however, have a much harder time resetting to a manageable size because the game grows not in numbers, but in features. And a stat squish would be more of a feature squish, removing excess mechanics or talents or skills. And this can involve changing the fundamental way in which certain playstyles will work.
On that, like, the change in meta can be extremely fucking punishing. Like, let's say patch 9.2, warlocks are just super overpowered. People love the warlocks, start PvPing with them, and then the next patch, warlocks are shit, and you're like, you feel cheated as well, right? So like, because some classes just scale better with stat points. Up until Legion, for example, red paladins, for the most part, like Mists, WoD, even Cataclysm, red paladins were pretty bad beginning of expansion, but because they're like such massive scalers, end of expansion, they were just fucking demolishing. Like, they were like top DPS, great in arena for just like duos and stuff like that. They would just do so much damage. But beginning of expansion, they were dog shit because they need the secondary stats to actually like be able to do what they can do, right? You need the extra haste, you need the mastery to do the damage and the crit. So it's like needing 30% haste, well, 22% haste, but like 30 is just a fun way. Needing 25 to 30% crit, needing 25 to 30% mastery, just to be like doing the damage that other people can do with just with their main stat, didn't feel as good, right? And you also cannot get those stats early into a patch or into expansion, but as the patches creep up, your secondary stats go up, and you can actually be able to compete, because others, even though they are scaling mostly with their main stat, Red Paladin, for example, was scaling with main stat. Let's say everyone was scaling like 1 point, like increased damage per point. Paladin was getting like increased damage per 1.2 points. So it's like the amount of strength you get is the same as the warrior, but warrior scales better with the strength compared to the paladin. The paladin, however, got a bigger boon from secondary stats, and then the secondary stats is really what matters for the red paladin. Therefore, up until you can get a lot of secondary stats, which is the end of an expansion, red paladins were not as good overall, right? But later on, they became fucking monsters. But it's like, what, am I not supposed to play my paladin for like majority of the expansion until it becomes really good? Like, it just sucks. So like if you do a massive stat squish, including secondary stats, paladins, for example, would get a much bigger nerf compared to, like, let's say mages, who scale with mostly intellect and crit. They don't need a lot of haste, mastery, and all that stuff. They need crit to an extent, like, depends on the mage, but it's like they just as an example, if they only need crit and intellect, meanwhile paladin needs haste, crit, mastery, and strength, the mage is going to have a much better time.
Neverwinter is again a good example. When life steal, a stat which restored your
own
by a portion of the damage you do, was removed, an entire style of tanking was removed from the game with it.
Yep.
Squishy players who relied on aggressive gameplay to survive were now useless. They were just squishy in death. The feat of squish and the removal of lifesteal actually made the game slower and the combat less intense, which was something Neverwinter had pushed away from for many, many years. Resetting vertical power creep feels bad, but is relatively simple. Resetting horizontal feature creep is much more challenging because features are tied to the moment.
That's not as bad.
But let's imagine a major reset does happen and you decide to take a break from the game, because no one likes to lose high numbers or skills they've come to enjoy. This brings up point 6. Taking a break and returning feels very different for both types of design.
Yeah. Vertical, you're irrelevant.
Turning to an RPG after a long time, thinking, what the hell was I even doing? I once returned to Chrono Trigger after a few months away, and after staring at the screen for a minute, I decided to just restart the whole game. Returning to an MMO is a daunting task, and the vertical-horizontal divide heavily changes that experience. Returning to a vertical game feels like starting again anyway. Your items and equipment are often useless and outclassed, and the content you knew is not being run anymore. The player base have all moved on to the latest area. So you're left fighting back up the ladder, doing content no one else is doing because it's just a step you need, but they are past it. Vertical games are often called treadmill games. If you stop running, you fall off, and then you need to catch up. Your friends and guild will shoot off ahead. But there is one good side to this, a silver lining to this cloud. You've got a pretty good idea of what you need to be aiming for. You just head to whatever the highest number is or the newest expansion is. The beauty of having an objectively best choice is you can just make that
It's a lot simpler.
Returning to a horizontal game, however, is a bit different. Your equipment often retains its power, and your rare items retain their value because they've not been outclassed, they're now just a variation on something else. So the player base is still doing what you already know. They're just doing it in different ways. There are new systems you need to learn.
I love the fact that he's playing a Mesmer. That is my class. Mesmer is like the most unique class I've ever played in MMORPGs. Not exactly sure what's so unique about it, but it's like, when have you ever seen a two-handed mage, you know? And it's like you have your somewhat melee, somewhat range, you have like buffs, you have like traps. It's such a unique game style. I love Mesmer. Super complicated, by the way.
In new ways. I get this feeling whenever I return to old school RuneScape. My skills haven't gone anywhere. My equipment is still useful, there's just new stuff to do in various directions. Returning to a horizontal progression game often feels easier because you feel that you've still got what you left. But now it's also harder to pick a direction because there's no objectively correct or best thing. It's often a case of, what do you want to do? And more often than not, you'll end up thinking, well,
there's too much to do.
I don't know what's worth doing. And all of this ultimately leads on to the final point. Vertical progression is focused on the satisfaction of the reward over the process. It values becoming powerful in a way others can see and then respect. It often leads to objectively correct choices in gameplay loops and character builds, whereas horizontal progression is more about enjoying the process than the reward itself, and becoming powerful in a way that's personally relevant to you, but not necessarily more.
And not only that, also like you become powerful in the way that you want to become powerful. Like you have more build options. You can go for like for example, ESO is probably like one of my favorite horizontal progression MMORPGs, and you have the Templar, and there's multiple builds for Templar. Obviously, if you play just like PvP, there's like 2 good builds of the meta, whatever. But it's like, I love playing Assassin Templar, which is like, what the fuck? It's like Templar is like a paladin or some shit, right? But it's like, no, you can build your Templar to be super squishy, sneak up on people, throw a spear, stun them, charge in, jab, 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 they're dead. Just fucking assassinate people. The problem is, if there's 2 people, you'll probably die to the second person. But it felt so good playing it. But a lot of people that play Templar, they play them to be semi-tanks, consistent damage type, not as much of the nuke, right? And I love just coming out of the shadow, nuking a person, just like getting out. If you have enough ultimate to use your rewind time, so you go back 5 seconds. So you go from your hidden place, you jump on the person, do your combo in like 3-4 seconds, kill them, switch bars, hit the ultimate, rewind time to where you were 5 seconds ago, and stay hidden again. It just felt so good. It's just like, it's so much fun to do. But you don't have that option with vertical, right? It's like by the time you even get... 1 second. Good sneeze. By the time you even get the gear for like just like to be top tier, you don't have time to get gear to just try other shit. And also vertical progression usually doesn't even allow you to try a lot of different things. There's only like 1 or 2 right answers for your build, and that's it.
Powerful than
you can't really play with your skills and stuff.
Encourage the players to play by adding new things for the players to chase. The allure of power and the dominance over other players and over the game itself. In a vertical game, power is the driving force. The journey is simply a step on the route to power. Horizontal design adds content for the players to experience, and the value of the experience itself is the valuable thing, even if you have nothing to show for the experience beyond memories and enjoyment. The satisfaction of gaining power is replaced with the personal satisfaction of overcoming a gaming challenge. Here's an interesting example. In Guild Wars 1, you can actually use the bonus input to just get given some of the best weapons in the game from the very start. You can use them immediately. So you'd be thinking, why am I playing the game? There's very little I can get that's better than what's been given to me. But while I was playing, I realized that's not the point of Guild Wars 1. The numbers are incredibly low and the items are relatively easy to get. You play for the enjoyment of the process of playing,
the experience.
not necessarily the gaining of power. So when you log into any MMO, ask yourself, why are you playing? Do you enjoy the process itself, or is the process simply a means to an end? Do you want to be objectively better and more powerful than others, or do you want to be as powerful in a different way? Do you want to be part of the race, constantly pushing forward into the more powerful, more difficult content, or are you content to go and do the older stuff because it still has meaning to you and isn't yet outdated? Are you a vertical progress player or a horizontal experience player? Let me know in the comments below. Another massive thank you to...
I feel like it just depends on the MMO. It's like when I play, for example, if I play ESO, I play it for the variety of options. When I play Final Fantasy, I play it mostly for the story, the patch story, stuff like that. When I play WoW, it's to like be the biggest dick in the group. So I think it just changes. I don't know if it changes because of the MMO or it changes because that's what I feel like doing. Like I want to prove that I'm the biggest dick, I'll play WoW. If I want to just, you know, chill and just like enjoy a good story, I'll play Final Fantasy. If I just want to try new interesting things, I play ESO. I never play them all at the same time. I feel like I'm just changing what I want to do, therefore I'm changing which game I'm playing, right? Though honestly, as far as ESO goes, because I usually play it for the variety and just like the trying out builds, I'm pretty much just doing that in Elden Rings if I am ever doing it, right? Because like Elden Rings just offers other types of ways to build your character. But again, I think it just depends on what you want at the moment. That's the type of game you play. Though I still want to play... I want to try out New World. I heard it's much better now. I want to get back to Guild Wars 2. Obviously, I can't do that because I don't even have time to play the Final Fantasy, which I really want to fucking play. But even today, I won't have time because, like, in 50 minutes, and there's no point logging into an MMORPG for 50 minutes, like, let's be real. But in 50 minutes, I have to go and drive my grandma somewhere. So it's like, you know, it's like, yeah, guess what? Like, I'm not gonna get to do that today as well, right? Hopefully, throughout the week, I can do it. Maybe, hopefully, you know, on next weekend, I won't have videos to react to, and I'll just do that. Yeah. Anyways, as always, I would call it more of a... Is it MMO opinion or is it more of a... like, what kind of player are you type of video? Like, that's what it is. But yeah. Speedo's back in Minipad for your new Guild Wars 2 character. There's grind, but it's not to get up to the standard, but rather to have options in that same standard, and I like that freedom. And expansion is actually expanding on the game when it's only relevant part of the game actual play. Yeah, I love when you do these videos because I feel like this is your niche, this type of analysis of games. Yeah, I would say it's MMO analysis. I'm just fan of horizontal progression. This is why I play ESO, as it has so many unique sets to attain, and while some are more effective than others, the variety allows for countless playstyles. In the same vein, I also prioritize roleplay over performance, mostly grinding for things that allow me to customize my aesthetic or playstyle. Yep. Kind of a diagonal player. I want to enjoy the process, but I also want there to be some point of what I'm doing. I think this applies to both types, I believe. Being the absolute best doesn't matter to me much, if at all, but just doing arbitrary content with little to no reward gets dull fairly quickly. Yeah, so I think like this guy is more of a horizontal player, because a lot of the content is arbitrary and vertical. That reward doesn't need to be stat-based necessarily, but there needs to be something beyond just the experience itself to avoid it wearing out its welcome. I like the fact that I can take a break from Guild Wars 2 and still come back without my character being gimped. That's a big one for me as well. That's why I love ESO. Also, it's nice to be able to jump around different maps and do different things depending on how I feel, with everything still being relevant. Yep. Again, he likes the options, not the treadmill. Yep. There's one thing on vertical progression I'd like to say. You can still have a great experience alongside the gaining of power. You can, but when it's repeated every patch, it gets very, very boring. It doesn't have to be a mindless grind. Yeah, he hasn't been playing for very long. However, games that have both the experience and the reward are very few and far between. I'm a huge fan of horizontal games. I'm also glad Fashion Wars, yeah, that's the one, Fashion Wars, gets more attention. When it comes to horizontal experiences, that is the game to play. The rest of the guild is all stacked on legendaries that require months of grind. No problem, I can still keep up with my exotic or ascended gear while chasing new fashion choices that from the expansion over stronger EQ since the difference equipment, since the difference is not very high. Okay, last comment. I'm definitely a horizontal type, dude. Like, is anyone... okay, here we go. I like vertical progression, but not for being more powerful than others. I like being able to look back and see how I've progressed myself and become more powerful than I was before. A bit of horizontal choice in which improvement to get first is all I need to feel like I'm deciding on my own journey. I agree with this. but only if the game allows you to feel stronger. Right? Like there was a time in WoW where like all the mobs were scaling based to your item level, so it kind of went to shit. But yeah. Anyways, yep, that's the video for today. And I think we're also done for today. Well, let's see. Thanks for watching.